underneath different parts of the city, like where I am now, and there were actually volunteer crews out here searching for Nancy Guthrie over the weekend in some of these tunnels. Could there be a deal worked legally so that someone who has information about where Nancy Guthrie is could come forward, someone who may have been involved in the kidnapping could come forward and give the information without getting criminally in trouble?
The first 48 hours of a missing person case are supposed to be the golden window to find the truth, when every trace is still fresh and every clue is still clear enough to follow. But in the case of Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old woman, that window was not just missed, it seems to have been broken from the very beginning. Not by obvious mistakes, but by very small details, just enough to push the entire investigation off course. And then in the middle of everything, a gap appears 41 minutes long, a stretch of time where all data disappears. No cameras, no signals, no traces. As if for exactly 41 minutes, someone turned off the entire world around her, leaving behind a perfect darkness with nothing to follow and nothing to hold on to. But the most frightening part is not what disappeared. It is what remained, a tiny detail almost ignored, but when examined closely, it shows this was not random. From that moment, the question changes. It is no longer, where is she? But who knew this was going to happen? Some disappearances begin with chaos, screams, signs of forced entry, broken doors, scattered belongings, everything turned upside down, as if the space itself reacted to what just happened. But this case begins with something far more unsettling: silence. A house standing there, intact in a way that feels unnatural. No broken windows, no forced locks, no signs of struggle, no detail that suggests disruption. Everything is exactly where it should be, clean, organized, as if no one ever entered. As if time inside that house froze at the last moment when everything was still normal. But that very perfection is what makes experienced investigators pause, observe longer, and ask more questions. Because in criminal investigations, a scene that is too clean is rarely a sign of safety. It is often a sign of control. A stranger entering in the dark will leave traces: a bump, a displaced object, something out of place. But here, none of that exists. No mess, no randomness, only near absolute stillness. And that stillness makes everything more abnormal than ever, because it is not the result of nothing happened. It may be the result of everything happened exactly as planned. 9:50 p.m., the last moment everything was still normal. A harmless timestamp at first, but later it becomes a key anchor for the entire investigation, because it marks the moment before everything slips out of normal logic. Then comes 1:47 a.m. A weak signal appears. Not clear. Not enough to draw conclusions, but enough to confirm that something happened in the darkness no one could see. And then 8 a.m., everything stops. Not slowly. Not because of a system failure. It stops completely. Signals gone. Data gone. As if an invisible hand intervened at the exact moment, deliberately shutting down the entire system so nothing could be recorded. The gap between those 2 points is only 41 minutes. But those 41 minutes become the most dangerous dark zone of the entire case, not just because data is missing, but because every theory that comes after becomes fragile. Because when you do not know what happened during such a critical window, you cannot be sure what is real and what has been hidden. The content in this video is for informational and reference purposes only. Although it has been cross-referenced with reputable sources, some details may have changed or may not be entirely accurate. 41 minutes with no data, no Wi-Fi, no movement, no reliable technical signal. A nearly perfect gap in a world where everything is recorded every second. And that perfection is exactly what makes it abnormal, because a gap like that almost never happens by chance. You can turn off one camera, you can delete one video, you can even disrupt a single device. But to blind multiple systems at the same time, from network connections to motion sensors, that is not luck or coincidence. It requires understanding how systems work, how they connect, and more importantly, how to make them all go silent for a long enough period. That does not happen in an instant. It is not random, it is preparation, a sequence of actions planned in advance. And when you look at that gap, you no longer see missing data. You start to see it as part of a plan, a part designed to make sure that whatever truly happened in those 41 minutes will never be fully seen. When investigators entered the house, they did not see chaos. No panic, no signs of rushed intrusion, But they noticed something else. Very small changes. Almost invisible. The plant pots near the walkway were still standing, not knocked over, not obviously disturbed. But their positions had shifted by a few centimeters. To an ordinary person, that detail means nothing. But to someone trained to read a scene, it signals controlled movement. Not a collision, not confusion in the dark, but intentional calculated movement. A stranger in low light would leave disorder something pushed too hard, something clearly out of place. But here, none of that exists. Only slight changes. Enough to notice, but not enough to attract attention immediately. As if the person who entered already knew the path, knew every position, every distance in that space. And from that moment, the direction of the investigation begins to change, from who entered to who could enter, without needing to find their way. Digital analysis strengthens the suspicion. No system error, no random failure, only signs of deliberate interference. A type of signal jamming executed at the exact right time, causing multiple devices in the same area to lose connection at once. And when that happens simultaneously, it is no longer coincidence. It is action. An action designed to make sure nothing is recorded, no image, no sound, no data. A darkness created not because technology failed, but because technology was deliberately disabled. But no matter how precise a plan is, some things cannot be completely erased. A small trace of blood is found. Not much, not shocking at first glance, but enough to analyze. And when examined deeper, it does not reflect chaotic violence. No signs of struggle, no uncontrolled force. Instead, it suggests controlled impact. A precise point of contact, no excess, no deviation. That does not come from panic. It comes from choice. From here, an internal conclusion begins to form. Data can be erased, but the body does not lie. DNA does not disappear. It only becomes more complex. And in this case, it does not appear as a clear trace. It is mixed, layered, overlapping like a tangled structure. Not random, but as if someone deliberately created a biological maze to slow down analysis, making everything harder, slower, and less certain. Then a new element appears in email. Short, no threats. Just one demand, 1 Bitcoin. The number sounds reasonable, but to those familiar with ransom cases, it is strangely unusual, too low for a professional plan, yet too high to be meaningless. So what is the real purpose? Money, attention, or simply a message sent with intent? I know what you do not know. What makes that email dangerous is not the amount, but the detail, inside information that was never made public. A piece of data only someone directly connected could know. From that point, the story splits. One direction sees an organized kidnapping. Another begins to question how familiar the perpetrator might be. That difference creates delay. And in investigations, delay always favors the one who committed the act. As time passes, evidence does not disappear, it becomes distorted. More data, but less certainty. And then an image appears, a masked person carrying a backpack. Not specialized equipment, not something hard to trace, just a simple common backpack, the kind you can find anywhere. But that very normality creates a contradiction. A complex plan paired with an ordinary detail. A professional would not choose this. An amateur could not execute such a plan. So there is another possibility: the person is trying to look like an amateur. They are playing a role. They move through the house without hesitation. No searching, no confusion. They know the path. They know the positions. They go exactly where they need to go. And they leave before the system can recover. This is not a random break-in. This is an action carried out by someone familiar with that space. When everything is put together, the shifted plant pots, the disrupted signals, the controlled blood trace, the email with insider details, the masked figure with an ordinary backpack, the 41 minutes are no longer a gap. They become a complete sequence of actions. A plan executed exactly as intended. And the most frightening part is not what happened, but how it happened. Smooth, precise, almost without error. We often ask where the victim is, but maybe that is not the right question. The right question is, who knew this would happen in advance? Who knew the house well enough to move without searching? Who understood the system deeply enough to disable it at the exact moment? Who was calm enough to do all of this without leaving signs of panic? In investigations, there is a concept called level of familiarity. It is not an accusation, not a conclusion, but a signal. A stranger breaks a door. A familiar person opens it. A stranger searches in the dark. A familiar person walks straight to the point. A stranger leaves chaos. A familiar person leaves in silence, and in this case, every sign leans toward the second. There is one final signal, not from cameras, not from phones, but from a biological device. A signal that is not easy to interfere with, and that signal is fading. Not day by day, but hour by hour. That turns the investigation into a race against time. No longer just piecing things together, but trying to preserve what has not yet been lost. Every second that passes could be the line between finding the truth and losing it forever. This case was never random. It was designed, step by step, minute by minute, gap by gap. And if you look closely enough, you may realize something even more disturbing. The name behind all of this may have been there from the very beginning. We just have not been ready to face it.